And hello and welcome back to the channel. Alright, now here's a video that I'm going to take it that most of us, if not all of us, will find to be good news. Now the video comes to me from my good friend Avalise, and Avalise, thank you for the video. Now the video deals with a frauditor who calls himself Direct D, aka Christopher Ruff. And if you're familiar with Christopher, then you know that his videos deal with harassing police. Okay, now he wants to disguise his actions as he's holding police accountable. Now I can only say that anybody who watches his videos, and if you feel that this is the way to hold police accountable, then you yourself have hatred towards law enforcement. Now mind you, this video here, he is promoting it that he was convicted for speaking profanity. Mind you, he doesn't imply that his actions had anything to do with it, only that he was saying bad words. And we should all be concerned about that, as if our government is trying to restrict our freedom of speech. Again, I say, this guy is not only a cop hater, he's a straight-up liar. Now, I will say that his profanity might have played a part in him getting convicted, but let's just say, again, if you've watched any of Christopher's videos, then I think his actions speak for itself. Let me show you the video that he supposedly says got him into problems.
Watch out, he'll run your house over. Buddy! Yo! Yo! Leaders in public safety. Get out of here, get on camera! Bad number. Fuck shit. Bad piggy, bad piggy! Get used to it. Fuck you! Get used to it! Piece of shit! Get used to it! That's 5220. Bad piggy, bad piggy. Fuck police.
You solicited a trespass, you stupid son of a bitch.
Soliciting a trespass.
You solicited it. We watched you.
That bitch,
you fucking idiot.
That's not how the law works.
Deuce, how fucking dumb can you be? How fucking dumb can you be, motherfucker? How fucking dumb can you be, motherfucker? You solicited a trespass. You stupid piece of fucking shit. Fuck you, Deuce. You fucking punk motherfucker.
Know your place, man.
Fuck you, dude. You are a straight piece of shit, Deuce. I'm gonna make you famous again. It's Chris here again, buddy. Yeah, we're gonna make you famous again, you stupid son of a bitch.
Why does Mesa have to act like this?
Fuck you, dude.
This makes no fucking sense. This is the worst. This is the worst.
Are you hiding? Yeah. Sorry about my language, everybody. I figure it's late, so
No, it's very fucking necessary right now.
straight pieces of shit right here.
Just a handcuffs are asking for a fucking name and badge number on public property. Tyrant pieces of shit. Oh, I was detained under suspicion.
Detained under suspicion.
As soon as I said is it a misdemeanor or felony, he goes, oh.
Bye-bye, dumbass.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
They left as quick as they showed up.
Alright, so now after watching that video, can anyone actually say that Christopher is holding police accountable? Can anyone actually say that what he does is benefiting the people? Now, he's selling it to his subscribers that he was found guilty for speaking profanity. Now, after I saw this video, I gotta call bullshit on that. I mean, what got him found guilty is what happened before the profanity came into the picture. Now, Let's listen to the next part of the video here where he's selling it to his subscribers that he was found guilty over speaking bad words. And that we should all be concerned because the government is trying to restrict our freedom of speech. Let's get to that.
Alright, now this is the audio from the trial. It's never been heard before, and I cut it down to the juiciest parts. I skipped all the stuff in between. There's no silent parts. It's all talking, and you get to clearly hear how they feel about people that use bad language in general. I mean, it's really sad, and you need to pay close attention because this has consequences for every American, not just for me. If they can get away with convicting me for saying fuck you and calling a police officer a piece of shit or a punk, that means that the future of America and the freedom of speech is seriously in danger.
So at this point, are officers starting to clear the scene?
Yes, at that point they had taken down the tape. Everyone, including the officers, we're leaving the scene at that point. We were done. We were leaving the scene.
Okay. So at some point, you guys put up crime scene tape?
Yes.
And why was that?
That was to try and establish a boundary to protect our scene involving our subject that we are investigating.
Okay. So despite the clear advisement that they weren't allowed on the property, that they needed to be on the sidewalk, and despite the fact that the sidewalk and the asphalt are clearly delineated, you had to put up crime scene tape in order to try to get people to stay out of the scene?
Correct. There were so many of them, and they were causing such a disturbance that we felt that we had to take further measures to try and maintain the order there at the scene.
Okay. And again, the person saying, the voice that you hear,
Yes.
do you recognize that voice?
Yes.
Okay. Whose voice is that?
Christopher Ruff.
Okay. Is that you on the left side of the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You're still not in the vehicle, and all of the other vehicles are leaving, correct?
Correct.
The individual, do you recognize the individual who's also on the left side of the screen and wearing a black baseball cap with a gray t-shirt?
Yes, the individual in this depiction on my right with the gray long sleeve shirt and the black cap with his back to us is Christopher Ruff.
Yeah. Do you recognize this video?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who is actually doing the recording in this video?
I recognize the voice that's
Okay.
prominent in the video.
And whose voice do you recognize that to be?
Christopher Ruff's.
Okay. Let me play a little bit more for you. Based on what you see in this video, do you believe that Christopher Ruff was the person recording this video?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Is this an accurate representation of the events of that night?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, the state would move to admit Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Mr. Ruff, I know you objected previously. Do you want to continue with your second objection? All right. The objection is noted. So the roll.
You're all by yourself while this is happening, correct?
Yes.
Has everybody else left the scene at this point?
Yes.
Now, you seem very calm and collected during this interaction. Did the defendant's behavior disturb your peace?
Absolutely. The words that they're using, those are fighting words. Those are insulting words. Those are words that you use when you're wanting to insult or provoke someone. I remained professional at the time. I didn't respond to their insults and their harassment. As a professional police officer, that's what I do. However, because of the fact that I remained calm and professional does not mean that I was not annoyed or harassed or disturbed.
Now, surely as a police officer, you encounter an F word here and there.
Certainly.
Okay. So what was it about the length or the intensity of this exchange that disturbed your peace?
Well, as you hear in the video, Mr. Ruff identifies himself as Chris, as being the person making the insults. And he also, he doesn't just call one or two insults, he repeatedly, over and over, using words like punk, using profanity, using obscene language. There's no one else around, no members of the public there. There's no investigation for them to record or to look into. It didn't appear to me that they were there for any other purpose than just to harass and annoy and follow me and on my way to my vehicle as I'm leaving the scene.
Now, he's really close to you at this point in the video. Was he this close to you during the previous, whatever it was, 30 or 45 minutes that he was on scene?
No, because for the most part, they, after we told them and to get on the sidewalk, they reluctantly did so after a whole lot of persuasion. They stayed, they meaning Mr. Ruff and the group, stayed in the sidewalk area trying to record us while we were doing our investigation. So after that investigation was over, and as we started to disperse, they became a little bit more brave, if you want to call it that. You saw in the video several of them step back onto the property and trespass after we told them not to, and that's as we were leaving. So and then at that point, Mr. Ruff, basically he's right in my face at that point, just a few feet from me, shining his light in my face, using profanity at me, insulting me. And
do you believe that the defendant and others present became more bold because the other officers were no longer there and they were leaving?
I think that's a reasonable inference that you could make.
Did Mr. Ruff go back onto the property in order to get that close to you?
I believe he did.
I'm
sorry, what was the question? Go ahead.
Did Mr. Ruff go back onto the property in order to get this close to you?
And your objection was hearsay?
Hearsay.
Well, it's not a statement, it's whether or not the officer actually observed you doing that.
When he's asking to what my intent was on why I walked around the front of a vehicle to get closer to him, that's hearsay. It doesn't have any relevance to trespassing or whatever we're going through.
Well, I think where they're going, Mr. Ruff, is they're going to the issue of disorderly conduct, perhaps, but I noted your objection. It is overruled. Go ahead.
I think you said you believe he went back on, but you can't be completely sure. Is that right?
Yes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's captured on a video, perhaps, of him being on the property afterwards. My own individual recollection, like, for example, right here in this video, do I know exactly where he's standing? I don't know.
Okay.
But it's my belief that he is on the property at that point.
I understand. Now I'm going to move to Exhibit 3.
Mr. Ruff, same objection?
Same objection.
Defense objection is noted, it's overruled.
When you get surrounded by a number of individuals like that in close proximity, what concerns you about that situation?
Well, obviously it's a concern for any officer, any police officer who's being insulted, who is being surrounded by a group of individuals who are clearly there, who do not like you, and could easily escalate into violence or into an assault on me or others.
I assume you don't know any of these guys personally.
I have dealt with Mr. Ruff on previous occasions. The others, I never had a group like that show up before on a call, but I dealt with Mr. Ruff previously.
And while it appears they're there to record, do you know their actual intentions?
We don't know their intentions, no, but all we can tell is by what they're saying and doing, which was clearly harassing us, violating the law by trespassing, and insulting, provoking us, using words that you would use to fight, that you would want someone to fight you with.
Based on your interaction with these individuals on that night, did you feel like they were hostile towards police?
100%.
I have no further questions, Judge.
Cross-examine.
All right, now, so after watching this portion of the video, some might say that I was wrong in what I stated in Christopher selling it to his subscribers that he was convicted for speaking profanity. But I'm going to stand behind what I said. I don't think the judge found him guilty for telling the officer to go F off or F you or you're a piece of shit, officer. I think he got found guilty for his actions. We all saw the video. And if you put yourself in that officer's shoes, you could imagine what was going through his head. You got 4 or 5 individuals that you don't know. And by what's coming out of their mouth, you can tell they don't like you. You don't know what's going through their mind. Could they just pull out and take them out? Come on now. With all the shit that we're seeing on the news lately, anything is possible. But that's just my opinion. Let's get back to the video.
Sergeant Dukes, did you tell me that I was trespassing at any point during our interaction?
I told you to get off the property.
Okay, but did you say you need to get off the property? You've been trespassed, you're trespassing now?
You saw the video.
I'm asking you right now.
Yes, I did. I told you to get off the property.
That's not what I asked you. I said, did you tell me that I was trespassing and that I needed to leave the property because the property owner didn't want me there?
I told you to get off the property. Did I say the word trespassing? I don't know. We can watch the video again.
Several times during your testimony with the prosecution, you stated that, yes, I'm trespassing on the property. Do you have the Maricopa County Assessor's map of the property to be able to determine if I was standing on the actual property that's owned by the hotel or if I was still on an easement as defined by an assessor's map?
Do I personally have a map? Is that
Did you? Yeah. Well, you testified that I was standing on the property, so I'm asking if you have evidence to show that that is actually the property. But we're talking about demarcation lines, which is irrelevant if there's a assessor's website with a line on it. So I'm just asking if you have knowledge that I actually was on their property, or are you just assuming it?
Mr. Ruff, can I just help you?
Sure.
I understand your question. I just think it's
You're not asking it right.
No, you're doing fine. I understand what you're trying to ask. So, officer, the area that we observed on the video where Mr. Ruff goes onto the property in the video, and you've seen it, we just watched it. Do you know if that is actually, if you have personal knowledge, do you know if that's actually property of the hotel, or is that considered public property?
I do not have personal knowledge.
Was that what you wanted to ask, Mr. Ruff?
That was. And I think my other question would be, in the beginning you said that reluctantly everybody went back onto the property, or went onto the sidewalk and got off of the property. Did you personally observe me at the time, not counting this video, go back onto the property, knowingly, intentionally back onto the property? Did you observe that yourself?
At the end, yeah, when you're standing on the property talking to me, yelling at me, insulting me, yes.
Okay. Sergeant Deuce, did you take a loyalty oath with the City of Mason?
Yes.
Okay, and in that loyalty oath, were you asked to uphold the Arizona Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America?
Yes.
Okay, and in the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of Arizona, we have the freedom of speech. So you testified that my language was aggressive, fighting. Did I ever threaten you with violence?
No.
No? Okay. Did I ever say anything that would make you feel like you would need to respond to my verbal whatever in that moment? Did I say anything that would make you feel like you would need to respond physically to me in that moment at the time?
I did not respond to any of your insults, but I felt like you were putting me personally and others there at the scene in danger by standing next to me, using that kind of language just a few feet from me, insulting me, and using the kind of language that you would use to someone that you're trying to provoke.
Okay, can you elaborate on how you're insinuating that I'm trying to provoke?
Any reasonable person, upon seeing that video, could infer that that's very insulting and provocative language.
Okay.
There aren't many other words in the English language that are more insulting and provocative than the words that were used on us that night.
But they weren't fighting words, right?
I would consider the words used fighting words.
So I said something.
That's my opinion.
Okay, so I said something along the lines that would make you think that I was going to assault physically or molest physically, something that made you feel unsafe by telling you that you're a piece of shit, fuck you, those kinds of things. You felt like I was going to do something violent towards you with that?
Your Honor, he asked a lot of questions there.
I understand. I know we have a prosecutor in the courtroom too, so I was waiting for an objection to go to the court.
Judge, sorry, I'd say we object to the form of the question.
Sustained. Mr. Ruff, try not to ask compound questions.
I understand.
Go ahead, Mr. Ruff.
All right, so let me jump back in here and comment quickly on Christopher here, who is trying to justify his profanity, that it should not be considered fighting words. And as we all just heard this officer state that at that time and moment, he felt that he was being provoked. And if we were to put ourselves in that officer's shoes and have 4 or 5 individuals surrounding us and speaking the language that they were speaking, that would tell us that they're not happy with us for whatever reasons and that they may want to go hands-on. So I understand where that officer is coming from. But if you see different, comment below. Let me know your interpretation of how you take it, and let me see if I could understand where you're coming from.
I'm just trying to get to the crux of how you feel I was disorderly and I was threatening you when you took an oath to uphold the Constitution of Arizona and the Constitution of the United States. There's Supreme Court case law. I've got 2 cases.
And I know the prosecutor is not objecting, but this is very compound. You're also editorializing.
I'm trying to get to the crux of my question.
I know you are, but Mr. Ruff, I'm aware of the Constitution. I'm aware of the rules. I'm aware that officers take an oath. So if you want to just ask your question, because it becomes compound and you're editorializing before you ask the question. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
I have some questions. Sergeant, we saw some video of Mr. Ruff contacting you and making statements to you. From the time that he speaks to you or shouts these things to you, from the time that you leave, in the video, you're walking to your patrol vehicle, would you agree?
Yes, Your Honor.
From the time that he starts yelling at you out of that until you reach your vehicle, how much time do you believe elapsed?
Oh, wow. A minute?
Okay. And was it only during this time that Mr. Ruff directed those statements towards you?
No. He was doing it while he's standing right there on the property.
And I guess that's what I meant. I meant from the time that he starts to do it. You're standing here next to the property in this still video.
Oh, okay.
In Exhibit 3. Would this be the first time that he approaches you and says things to you?
It's the first time he approaches me on the property. He insulted me and specifically named me, even at the very beginning of the video, very beginning of the incident. He saw me and personally called my name out and began insulting me as soon as they showed up, as soon as he saw me. And then at this, where you see here, Your Honor, so I guess from this point to where they're standing there insulting and yelling at us while the vehicles are backing out and leaving and we're trying to leave the scene, they're continuing to cause a disturbance. From that time to the time I got to my vehicle, probably 2 or 3 minutes. I'd estimate. That's an approximation.
But I know that you testified that your piece was deserved. While you were walking, and I see Mr. Ruff in the video following you, did you ever turn around?
Yes.
Is there a reason why you turned around?
Well, I didn't want to turn my back, Your Honor, to a group of individuals like that the entire time. That's just not smart. So I turned around to see exactly what they were doing besides yelling and insulting me, just to make sure that there wasn't anything further than that they were attempting to do to me.
Obviously, as an officer, you always have that concern for officer safety, and you're trained in that matter to be aware of your circumstances. Would you agree?
Yes, Your Honor.
In this situation, did you ever have to do anything aside from making an observation where these individuals were perhaps who were following you? Did you ever have to do anything more in terms of a physical movement, whether that to approach them, to perhaps pull out a taser if you had one? Did you ever feel that you needed to do that at any time?
Well, Your Honor, I can tell you I was feeling very, very uneasy the entire time walking back to my vehicle with my back to a group of individuals that, in their own words, are insulting and clearly hate the police, and words that would be used to insult and provoke a person into some sort of incident. However, again, I behaved in a professional manner. I didn't let my fear of them try and get to me to where I would physically do something to them. As you know, Your Honor, people with video cameras and people who are trying to follow you and record you, I understand the rights of everyone involved, and I was trying very, very careful to not violate any other people.
All right, so let me just jump back in here real quick and comment. As you notice, Christopher threw up a text there on the top there that the officer is explaining what a coward is. Now, this goes to show you the mentality that this individual has. He truly feels that police should just stand there and suck up any abuse they give them. Now, mind you, again, freedom of speech does cover controversial language, but come on now. No one, whether they work for the public or not, should be spoken to in that fashion. Understandable that there are going to be times you get into an argument with someone and the profanity may come out, but this is every day now. This is every interaction that this man has with law enforcement, okay? His mentality that as a public servant, he has the right to talk to them like shit, and that is not right. That is not what the Constitution was written for you to just talk to people that work for the public like they're a piece of shit. Now, that's the way I see it.
People's rights. At the same time, I wanted to be safe as well. But again, you have to take into account the use of force, you know, the use of force policies that we have, Graham versus Connor, and we have all of those types of things to consider. So can I pull out my taser and point at them and threaten them? Those are things that I considered, but I chose just to remain professional and attempt to leave the situation. But they did not want to let the situation go, it seemed, because they continued to follow and harass me and yell at me.
Okay, let me just ask you this question. Specifically as it pertains to Mr. Ruff, and I know he asked you during his examination, and I know you testified that you felt that these were fighting words. Did Mr. Ruff in any way verbally indicate that he was going to harm you?
Did he specifically say he was going to harm me? No.
So would you agree it was the epithets that we hear, correct? Calling you a piece of shit, using the F word, correct?
Yeah. That in combination with their proximity.
Right. Any follow-up, Mr. Hawkins, to that?
Sure. Thank you, Judge. Sergeant, just presumably there's multiple different ways to diffuse a situation, correct?
Yes.
Would you say that sometimes it's necessary in your job in law enforcement to use a show of force in order to calm a situation and diffuse it?
It can be necessary at times, yes.
And are there times where trying to walk away is the best way to diffuse a situation?
There are many times. De-escalation is one of those. In de-escalation, that's a tactic that we use to try and diffuse a situation by either walking away or separating ourselves or creating distance between us and the situation.
Does the fact that you chose to walk away while being careful in any way lessen the concern that you felt on that night as you were being surrounded and yelled at?
Not at all, no.
I don't have anything further, Judge.
Mr. Ruff, you have an opportunity for any questions. You have some follow-up questions. No. All right, officer, you can sit down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let me just tell you what obviously cropped into my head, and I know that you can probably anticipate this. I think a Rule 20 motion can be brought upon by the court itself, but help me with the disorderly conduct charge. I haven't read the case law on it recently, and I didn't realize before we started today that he's going to be a police officer that is your victim. But doesn't case law talk about, I mean, clearly I believe that Mr. Ruff's statements were on a line. Clearly I believe that if he was speaking to somebody who was not a uniformed police officer, that I could easily make that finding of disturbing the peace. When it comes to a police officer, is there a different standard, though, Mr. Hawkins? Is there not?
There is, Judge. Yeah.
So,
and frankly, that is the question for the court: is we know that an individual's conduct can rise to the level of disorderly conduct even when the victim is a police officer. We also know that legally a police officer is obligated to put up with more than an average person. And that is the question for the court, is does this cross that threshold? The state's perspective is that yes, it does. And I don't know if you want me to treat this as a Rule 20 and make an argument, or we're talking through it, Judge, but...
Yeah, well, I'm actually raising it because I think it's proper for the court to raise it, especially since Mr. Ruff is representing himself. But I mean, that's my question legally at this point.
Right. And Judge, the case law, I believe, goes to the kind of the length and the intensity of the interaction. Again, obviously an officer is going to get yelled at a lot. He's going to get cussed at. He's going to get sworn at. He's going to get called the F word and a lot of other words.
I think that goes to my question, right? And I think you probably gathered that when I was asking the officer how long from the point that Mr. Ruff approached him that we could see on the video until he gets to his vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said, and I may be incorrect, but I thought he said 60 seconds. I may be wrong. I can actually look at the video myself, but I know you were starting it and stopping it and playing various portions. So, and I also know that the officer testified that he was yelling at him earlier. And I don't know what distance that was. Again, there were portions or clips of the video played, but that's my concern. And I don't know if there's some threshold that and again, I haven't looked at case law in a long time.
And the case law is fairly vague, Judge. I mean, there's references to conceivably a verbal harangue may be so staged and be of such length and disconcerting in its character as to rise to the level of a crime. You know, so it talks about it in the same general terms that we're talking about it. And that is the issue for the court to decide. And again, the state's position is that this does cross that threshold for a number of reasons. Not just Mr. Ruff's individual conduct, but the fact that he appeared to wait until the other officers left. He appeared to wait until Sergeant Deuce was by himself. That when those other officers left, he went back onto the property. He clearly knew he wasn't supposed to be on that property. He didn't trespass on that property until the other officers had left. And then he went on, along with multiple other men, and surrounded this officer, at which time he got very close to Sergeant Deuce. So his proximity to Sergeant Deuce factors in. If he's 30 yards away and he's screaming all these things, it's much different than when he's 2 feet away, right in Sergeant Deuce's face, with a bright light, surrounded by other individuals, and then following him all the way to his vehicle. And Judge, I guess the state's perspective is, frankly, the individuals who are recording police officers, the recording is not the issue. It never has been. It's all of the other behavior. Frankly, they are looking for that line. If this isn't it, the next case will be further than this. Okay? And I know that's not what should decide this case, but that's what brought this about. It slowly escalated to this point, and it will continue to escalate if the defendant walks out of this courtroom with this court's endorsement of this behavior is perfectly legal.
Oh, Mr. Hawkins.
Because you're telling him this is legal behavior.
Mr. Hawkins.
All right, so let me jump back in here and comment on the prosecutor. I think we could all agree that this prosecutor said everything that we think about these frauditors, okay? I'm sure we've all seen plenty of videos where these frauditors, when things don't go their way, it was because of the recording that we got kicked out. It was because we were recording that we got arrested, and the recording, everything's about the recording. It ain't got shit to do with the recording. It's how you go about recording. That is what is the problem. This prosecutor was spot on. Really, he said things that we all know is true. And the judge had to take that into consideration, as he did find this individual guilty. And even though Christopher here is trying to make it seem like he was set as an example or whatever, he knows the prosecutor called him out on his bullshit. I really want to know how you guys feel about the prosecutor and how he stated this. I tell you, put a smile on my face, because I always thought a lot of these prosecutors are full of shit when it comes to these guys. Don't they understand and see what these guys are doing? And this particular prosecutor is on his game.
That's not, I'm just asked that you refrain from that. understand what you're telling me. I'm not here to send a message. At this point, I'm here to decide.
And I'm not saying the court's here to send a message, Judge. I'm saying that that should help the court in deciding what the threshold is. Because if this isn't enough, then what is? I mean, where does it have to go from here?
And I guess I was turning to you because I know that you're handling this case, and I know that you probably, Mr. Hawkins, looked at, perhaps, it sounds like you perhaps may have looked at some of this case law, and again, regarding the disturbing of the peace of an officer. We're talking about evidence, and so that's why I sort of turned to you. I guess that's my sticking point. That I haven't read case law in a while, and I can tell you both that if I don't hear more or see more, it's just something I still want to go and look at because I have to make that determination. You heard me say that obviously if this was an individual who wasn't a police officer, it'd be real easy. I think the evidence is overwhelming as to that aspect. But when it comes to this being a police officer, I don't know. I mean, I saw snippets, understanding I saw snippets, and so I want to watch more of the video to see how long it progressed, how often he was directing it towards the officer. If it's just the 60-second portion, then I'll have to look at it more closely. But that's an issue for me, and I understand that, and I appreciate your comments. So.
And just the only thing I would add, I guess, just as far as I don't know if this is officially a Rule 20 or what is it?
It is, and I've raised it.
The officer also testified, and I believe it's on the video as well, that he was immediately identified by the defendant, okay, from the very get-go of this entire interaction, and that he was addressed by the defendant and insulted by the defendant throughout the entirety of their time together. Now, again, it was at a distance because there were other officers there, they had established a line, they put up crime scene tape, but that doesn't mean that the court should ignore that. Okay? It simply means, and it should go to the rising concern of Sergeant Deuce when that tape came down and the other officers left, that the defendant then closed distance. But he immediately recognized Sergeant Deuce from the very beginning. He was addressing Sergeant Deuce throughout the interaction. So when we talk about the intensity and the length of the interaction, it includes this entire time period that this was going on, which was, I believe the officer guessed, 30 or 45 minutes. But
and so, Mr. Hawkins, I'm not going to grant a Rule 20 at this point. I'm raising the issue at Rule 20 because I'm just wanting to let you know what my issue is. I believe in the light most favorable to the state. I wouldn't grant a Rule 20 at this point, but I am raising it because I do have some concerns about it. The other thing, just so you know, I'm taking into account the fact that there were multiple individuals as well. So I just wanted to reach out to you to hear your feedback on that issue.
Yeah, and I understand, and these are novel issues. You know, we briefed something on a previous case, and I'd be happy to brief this if the court would like that as well. So I understand they're not easy questions. They are general lines. I don't know that the court's going to find case law that says, "Hey, on the 10th F word, you've crossed the threshold." Obviously, you know, it's a hard question.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Ruff, I wanted to raise that issue with the prosecution because obviously it's something that I need to look into.
I have case law here.
Okay.
In my favor. There's Houston versus Hill and Cohen v. California, which literally says that to verbally challenge and oppose the police is a fundamental freedom that distinguishes America from a free state or a free country to a police state.
Okay. So how's that? Do you have a citation for me?
Cohen v. California is 403 U.S. 403 U.S. 15, 1971.
All right. What's the name of that case you said?
That's Cohen v. California.
All right.
And then we have City of Houston versus Hill. That's 482 U.S. 451, 1987. These are upheld and still in good standing.
All right. I'll have to review those, Mr. Ruff, as well as some other work.
I brought copies if you want a copy.
That's okay. I can actually pull it up.
I'd love a copy if I could have them.
With Westlaw.
This is just off.
Okay, so Mr. Ruff, notwithstanding the fact that you have case law, I am familiar with the case law. I've read it. It's been a long time. I do believe, again, I would not grant a Rule 20 at this point. The state has rested. Knowing that they have rested, do you have anything that you want to present to the court in terms of evidence or testimony?
Just my own testimony.
All right. Did you want to testify, Mr. Ruff?
Yeah.
Mr. Ruff, since you are going to be cross-examined, I am going to have you come to the stand for me. Okay. You could raise your right hand for me. Do you swear from the testimony that you are about to provide in this court will be the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. All right, go ahead and grab a seat. All right, Mr. Ruff, go ahead.
So on the night in question, we were out with some out-of-town friends, exercising our First Amendment rights as journalists and members of the free press, documenting police encounters throughout the state of Arizona, specifically the city of Mesa, when we noticed, I think we either heard a radio call or we saw the lights. Either way, we saw what we thought was a traffic stop happening at the hotel in question.
All right, Mr. Ruff, I'm just going to stop so I can ask you a question. When you say you heard a radio call, how would it be that you'd hear a radio call?
That's a radio scanner app on a cell phone.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we park somewhere legal, get out, walk up to the scene. Initially when we showed up, I didn't say anything. I can't speak for other individuals, but I stayed quiet and didn't say anything. Other individuals went onto the property immediately to get different camera angles. The officers testify and say that we're surrounding them, trying to harass them, but we all operate different YouTube channels, and we don't all want to be standing crowded right next to each other. There's 9 of us, so it would be reasonable for us to spread out and get different camera angles. Immediately, when some of the other gentlemen went onto the property, the officers started saying that we were trespassing without ever hearing a representative of the property come out and say that we were trespassing. Just immediately, you're trespassing, you need to get off the property, you're not allowed to be here. As soon as we show up, that's how we're being treated. And some other individuals in our group were yelling and telling the guy, don't talk to the cops. And there was some back and forth between the group and the police, but that was initiated because we were told that we were trespassing as soon as we showed up. At no point did anybody tell me that I was trespassing from the property, that I was trespassed. I was told I need to stay on the sidewalk, but you know, that's very confusing and arbitrary, and I'm pretty sure I stayed on the sidewalk the whole time. I didn't knowingly enter the property again with the intent to trespass at any point during the interaction. I was told to stay off of it. Once I understood that concept, I stayed off the property to the best of my knowledge. I never went back onto the property with the intent to chase a police officer, to have an interaction, to defy somebody's orders. You know, there's a couple incidences in the video where it shows me standing on a different coloration of the ground, but the state has failed to present evidence that shows that I was even on the private property after allegedly being told to leave. So, they told us to stay on the sidewalk. I stayed on the sidewalk. There were a couple incidences where I had to avoid a police vehicle or a police officer that was on the sidewalk when they were removing tape, where it's feasible that I might have strayed over an imaginary line that hasn't been proven as being private or public property yet.
Mr. Ruff, let me just ask you a question. You said that when you immediately arrived, you were informed by law enforcement or a police officer that you were trespassing?
They said you guys are trespassing.
Okay, and did they tell you to get off the property at that point?
I don't remember. I know that I heard them say immediately you're trespassing, but that's not how trespassing works in Arizona.
Well, aside from whether or not you believe it, how it works, you heard an officer tell you immediately that you were trespassing, is that correct?
Sure.
Did you then leave the premise or get off the property at that point? Okay.
Well, absolutely. And I never went back on the property knowingly. The state has failed to field evidence that shows that I knowingly entered or remain on the property as defined by the trespassing ARS. I mean, they showed you some videos, but...
Would you agree, Mr. Ruff, that in the video that was shown, obviously it clearly depicts you where you're standing close to Sergeant Deuce, that you are not on the sidewalk? Would you agree with that?
That I'm not on the sidewalk? I
Right.
could agree that I'm not on the sidewalk, sure.
Would you agree that you walked onto the asphalt area?
I mean, as far as what the video shows, that's what the video shows. I don't know if that's what I did. I wasn't.
When you saw the video, there appears to be a yellow speed bump in that video
Right.
as well.
And I
You see
didn't go
that?
past that speed bump.
Well, I think you were actually standing on it. Were you not?
On it, on the other side of it. Trespassing, I mean,
That's okay, go ahead. I'm gonna let you keep.
no, that's fine. Do you have any other questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Ruff.
I don't even know where I was at. Came, we filmed. I cussed the Sergeant Juice repeatedly. I told him that he was a piece of shit, a worthless motherfucker, all kinds of bad language. I said, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I said it over and over and over and over and over.
All right, Mr.
Because
Ruff.
I've had previous encounters with Sergeant Juice where he's threatened me with arrest. Every single time I've had an encounter with him, he threatens me. So the behavior of that day was based on, like he testified, we've had prior encounters to where he hasn't treated me very nice and he's threatened me with arrest. He's actually been there at one of my illegal arrests.
All right, Mr. Ruff. Told us in the video, obviously speaks for itself, about how over and over and over you were saying these things to the officer.
You know, fuck you and you're a
Right.
piece of shit, yeah.
All right, Mr. Ruff, what was your intent in doing that?
To let him know how I feel. It's called a protest. It's one of the First Amendments of the United States of America. I'm allowed to protest and oppose police actions. There's no law that says I can't do that. I didn't threaten him with violence. I didn't threaten his person. I didn't say anything that was actionable as per, you know, what would not be covered under the First Amendment. There was no threat of violence. He obviously didn't feel threatened. He says he didn't turn around. There was nobody threatened him. He's had prior encounters with me before this incident to know that I'm not violent. I've never threatened him prior to that. So to feel and say that I was threatening him is absurd. He's known me. He's been known to me. So I called him by his name when we first showed up because I know exactly who Sergeant Deuce is.
Well, if you have anything further, if not, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hawkins so he can cross-examine.
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Hawkins.
So you have had prior interactions with Sergeant Deuce.
Yep.
Do you think that those prior interactions may have played into his level of concern when you approached him closely and were swearing and cussing at him?
What level of concern are you talking about? What he
Level of
vocalized
concern.
today? Because I didn't see any at the scene.
The level of concern that he has expressed today.
With that, I'm not understanding your question. What are you asking?
I'm asking that you said part of the reason that you approached Sergeant Deuce and you were swearing at him and were so hostile towards him is at least partially because of your past interactions with him, correct?
Sure.
So your past interactions with Sergeant Deuce fed into you treating him hostilely. Don't you think that your past interactions with Sergeant Deuce would have also caused him to feel increased concern when you approached him so close and were treating him so hostilely?
No. That's my right under the First Amendment of freedom of speech to cuss at whoever I want, to say whatever I want, as long as I'm not threatening anybody or making an actionable statement.
Right. So your belief is that your First Amendment right is that you could follow Sergeant Deuce around all day long and curse and swear and stand as close as you were to him all day long, and that is your right to do that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The harassment ARS in Arizona specifically excludes police officers from harassment.
Throughout your video, you constantly say things like, smash that like button, everybody. What does that mean?
That's promoting the video to get more people watching.
Okay, and what does that accomplish?
It gets more eyes on the police officer's bad behavior.
Okay, and what does it do for you?
Do anything for me. It makes them look really bad on the internet.
And it doesn't make you any more money?
I mean, money's irrelevant. Are they getting paid as police officers to be out here?
So you're saying throughout this video, when you say, smash that like button, everybody, smash that like button, and you're getting contributions.
I'm not getting paid for people pushing the like button.
But you are getting paid from people who are watching your videos, correct?
No, not necessarily.
I could play the video for you, and it shows the contributions on the right-hand side, does it not?
Those are contra. You said I'm getting paid for people watching. That's not what's happening. People are donating money, so be specific.
You are receiving money from individuals watching your videos.
Sure, on their own behest, they are sending me money. Yeah, so what?
And the more people who smash that like button, the more you are able to monetize your site through YouTube, correct?
That's not how it works.
Then why are you saying smash that like button?
Because it promotes the video in the algorithm on YouTube, which gets more viewers, which brings more eyesight to the bad behavior of the police officers that are where you're filming. Instead of 500 people watching live, I could have 1,500 people watching live.
Okay, and in this instance, surrounding Deuce and him standing there and not reacting, what was his bad behavior in that instance?
What's the relevance to his bad behavior? I'm allowed to verbally challenge and oppose the police, regardless of what they're doing.
You believe you are?
I know I am.
Okay. Were you on the property that night?
Not to my knowledge, knowingly, no.
Oh, okay. So in this case, what you know is different than what's shown in the video, correct?
I mean, the video can show one thing, but the ARS for trespassing is knowingly entering or remaining. Can you prove that I knowingly entered or remained intentionally onto the property? Because you haven't been able to do that yet.
Did you go back on the property after they told you you couldn't go on?
Allegedly, according to the video, I did, right? But I have no knowledge of intentionally doing that.
Is this a fabrication?
No, the video is accurate, but
okay.
You know.
So it accurately depicts you on the property.
Sure, but that's not knowingly entering.
After you were asked to leave the property, correct?
I was asked to stand on the sidewalk. I was never actually asked to leave the property or told that I was trespassing.
So Sergeant Deuce, when he came out of the office, didn't say, the owner doesn't want you guys on the property, you need to be on the sidewalk.
Actually, yeah, he did say that. Doesn't want you guys on the property, he wants you on the sidewalk. So he's not specifically talking to me. See, that's the whole
There's
problem.
no question at this point, Judge.
Hang on, Mr. Ruff.
I don't have any further questions, Judge.
I have some questions. Mr. Ruff, you said you heard a radio call, or you may have. I realize that the police officers were responding to something not involving you gentlemen who are coming with your cameras, right?
Right. Never involves us.
Right. And so when you arrive, I mean, you just testified that you do these videotapings so you can show the bad behavior of the police, correct?
Correct.
Can you please tell me what Sergeant Deuce did that night that was bad behavior?
Well, going into a business and asking them to trespass us because they don't like us being around them and filming them is bad behavior.
Well, you heard the owner say that he had spoken to the manager, and the manager had some issues.
The manager didn't even know we were there until the officers went and banged on the door.
Objection calls for speculation.
It's on the video, it's not speculation.
Well, I'm going to overrule it. I'm going to accept this answer. Mr. Ruff, my question is this. You heard the owner of the property say that he spoke to the manager and they were having issues with you, correct? I mean, as a group, not singling you out personally, but they had issues. Would you agree you heard that testimony?
I heard that testimony.
And would you agree then that the owner said that he didn't want you on the property? Would you agree that you heard that? Not you specifically, but the group.
Well, hold on now. Are you saying it in the time did I hear that, or right now when it was testified in court?
Today in court.
Okay, yeah, I heard it say that.
So, tell me what bad behavior then Sergeant Deuce did that night. Did he yell at you? Did he call you cuss words?
No.
Did he scream any epithets at you?
He's not allowed to, no.
Did he use any force against you?
No.
Did he do anything to you specifically other than asking you to get back off the property?
Yeah. No.
So it's your testimony that the only thing that this officer did bad to you, Sergeant Deuce, is that he told you to get back off the property to stand on the sidewalk. Is that correct?
In this specific incident, yeah.
Because this is the incident you're on trial for. And as a result of that, you believed that you were justified in carrying on the way you did to him.
Justified, Your Honor, it's my First Amendment constitutional right that you swore a loyalty oath with Mesa and the prosecutor and the police to uphold my right to verbally challenge and oppose the police. It doesn't matter what justification there is. I can walk up to a cop outside of this building and tell him to go fuck himself in the ass as hard as he can, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Because it's freedom of speech, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. Ruff, you and I may have a disagreement as to what we can say and when and how and to who.
Unless it's fighting words or a provocation that's actionable in the event, in the moment, it's freedom of speech. You cannot criminalize my speech. That's why I'm allowed to say "fuck you" right now in the courtroom. Is because you can't do anything.
Well, I'm gonna tell you that that isn't true. When you're in a courtroom, I understand that's part of the testimony in the trial, but I would not allow someone to speak in my courtroom that way. I would find them in contempt because I have the authority to do so. So I just want to correct you that, no, that wouldn't be allowed. But is there, I know that you said that you wanted to record the bad actions of the police, and I'm trying to figure out what the bad actions of this officer were that night. That's what I'm getting at.
Why are we focused on his bad actions?
No.
It's the whole group of the police that trespassed us, threatened us with arrest.
I understand.
Are you kidding me? What?
Mr. Ruff, I'm only doing it because, I'm only asking because it was your testimony that you said you were recording and doing this so that people could see the bad actions of the police.
That's the generalization of why we are doing this. Why was I filming this one stop? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm just saying that's what you testified to. So my question then, my follow-up is what was the bad action, or the yes, the bad actions, I guess, of Sergeant Deuce, because that was your statement as to why you were recording.
No. My statement to why I was recording is a generalization. We filmed the police to show bad police officers. Why I was filming this stop is because it was happening. It was there. I'm allowed to record it. There's no reason why I shouldn't be there recording it.
Okay. And your reason for yelling those things at Sergeant Deuce?
I don't have to have a reason. I'm allowed to.
Okay. Mr. Hawkins, you got any follow-up?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Ruff, you have a right to what's called redirect. Do you wish to make any statement in narrative form on what I would call redirect examination?
Redirect for what?
Well, it's up to you. I mean, obviously, you testified on direct. Mr. Hawkins asked you questions. I asked you some questions. You're allowed redirect examination. Since you don't have somebody here asking you questions as your attorney, I'm allowing you to make a narrative statement if you have anything further you'd like to say.
This isn't my closing argument?
No, it's not your closing argument. It's about evidence. Okay. You can step down, Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff, do you have anything further to present?
No.
Are you resting then?
I'm resting.
Closing arguments, Nate? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any rebuttal?
Yeah, I was just debating that, Judge. No, not at this time. Stay with us.
Closing then?
Certainly. Your Honor, you've seen the video, and part of the reason the state wanted to show so much video is because it is the best evidence of what happened. We saw the officers, we saw the number of agitators that were present. At some point, the officers decided to go into the motel office to talk to management there. We heard from the owner of the motel who said that his manager called him, expressed some concerns. The owner conveyed to police that he wanted those individuals trespassed. Sergeant Deuce walks out the door, says the owner doesn't want you on the property, you need to get on the sidewalk. You saw Officer Klein and Officer Hemp, who also were constantly trying to get the individuals to get off of the property. This was a very tense situation from the get-go. And you can watch more of those videos to see all of that. It's not as though this suddenly like rose in intensity at the very end. Okay? It was intense from the very beginning. That's why they had to go into the office. That's why they had to get these guys off of the property. They were trying to contact a felony suspect with all of these agitators around them, auditors around them with their cameras. You heard one of the officers testify that they got too close. They were in their personal space. It was just such an issue that they then went to the management and the individual trespassed. And you saw the hostility that these individuals all had toward the officers when they were asked to move off the property. And we're only talking a couple of feet, and yet they were sworn at, cursed at. And the court should not take, the court's not obligated to take Mr. Ruff's actions in a vacuum. Okay? His actions contributed to the entire scene there. He was part of that group. Sergeant Deuce testified that, and it's on the video and you can see that as well, that the defendant identified him almost immediately when he was on scene. And he immediately began to insult him and yell at him. The defendant has testified that partially this was based on past interactions with Sergeant Deuce. Again, it's not to be taken in a vacuum. The defendant said he was motivated by his past interactions with Sergeant Deuce. Sergeant Deuce's concern would also be motivated by past interactions with the defendant. I mean, he testified about the hostility he feels towards Sergeant Deuce. And so you start to look at the length and the intensity of the interaction. This goes on for 30 or 45 minutes. Finally, the other officers leave. The tape is taken down. They had to put up tape. The tape is taken down. The officers start to leave. The sergeant on scene doesn't leave until the end. And you can watch it unfold, and it's just so predictable. As the officers go to leave, suddenly everybody's emboldened. And they go back onto the property. Sergeant Deuce is surrounded. The intensity of the verbal attacks raises significantly. The defendant gets closer than anybody else there and gets right on Sergeant Deuce and is just swearing and cursing at him. And you heard all the language, and it's all been repeated, obviously verbatim. And this goes on for the next couple of minutes and following to his vehicle, while he is alone, while he is aware of his past interactions with the defendant, while he is there by himself with his back turned. And he testified that, yeah, he did turn around periodically to see what was going on behind him because of his concern. But the fact that Sergeant Deuce didn't suddenly attack and try to fight 8 guys doesn't mean his peace wasn't disturbed. He testified about, hey, there's other ways to lower the intensity of a situation, to de-escalate it. And frankly, he took the high road here. He did de-escalate it. He walked away, which is what we want our officers to do. But it does not mean that the underlying behavior is excused. That level of hostility and vitriol and the length and the intensity of it is not protected by the law. There is a line, and the case law talks about it. Regarding disorderly conduct,
are you looking at a site?
I am, Judge. There's a case, and again, you're right, that the cases are not, they're not going to spell out, hey, if it goes on for 90 seconds and there's 20 F words, then you cross the threshold, okay? But it does say, the case law does say things like, words must be considered in the specific context in which they are spoken to determine if they likely will provoke a violent response. The context should include objectively discernible attributes or characteristics, such as occupation of the addressee. And that's going to things like whether it's a police officer or whether it's a normal civilian. But what it doesn't say, and what you won't find, and what's not in this case law, for lack of a better phrase, that the defendant has provided, it does not say that you can say whatever you want for as long as you want, wherever you want, however you want, to a police officer. That would be crazy, and that's not what this says. One of these cases goes to an ordinance that a city passed. It's declaring the ordinance unconstitutional because it wasn't specific enough in what it restricted and what it allowed. That's not the same thing. The other case also does not go to this issue. It goes to a slogan that somebody posted, and not to this type of situation where somebody is verbally attacking a police officer, is closing in distance, is increasing in intensity as the officer's backup has left. That type of behavior crosses the threshold. And again, Judge, I'm not saying this to have the court send a message. I'm saying it because if this isn't sufficient, the court at some point has to ask itself, so what would it take? I mean, what would it take for somebody to get so violent in their words that it crosses that threshold? The defendant clearly believes there is no threshold. There's no crossing. There's no length of time, there's no intensity that it ever becomes a crime. That's simply not the case. That is not the case law, that's not the state of the law. The state's position is this did cross that line.
and the state would ask you to find him guilty. Judge, I haven't touched on the trespass because it's just so obvious that he's guilty at this point, and I'm not going to address it.
On the case law, though, that you were reading from, are you reading from the case that Mr. Ruff cited?
No, I'm not, Judge.
What was that case that you were talking about?
The case I cited to is an Arizona case. It's In Re Nicholas.
What's the site?
245 P3D 446.
All right. Mr. Ruff, this is your opportunity for closing argument.
So, to the trespassing charge. All the officers clearly testified that nobody told me that I was trespassing. There was never any mention that if I come back on the property, I'm going to get arrested. The state has failed to establish what the property lines even are. So to say that I trespassed knowingly and intelligently or remained on the property is all hearsay and irrelevant. The state didn't present any evidence that showed I trespassed. None of the police officers testified that I trespassed. None of them even gave me a trespass warning. To blanketly tell a group of 9 people that, and then to assume that all of them heard you and understand what you're saying, that you're trespassing is crazy. It has to be very specific. If you come back on the property, you're going to get arrested for trespassing. It's called a reasonable notice, either a sign or a representative of the property. If they were told that we weren't there, they didn't properly relay that to me. I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. I understood that they didn't want us on the property, so I wasn't going on the property. After he came out of the office and said the owner doesn't want you guys here, which isn't a trespassing. That's not trespassing. Owner just doesn't want you here. I've got businesses that I go to all the time where they tell homeless people, we don't want you here. They go, but they come back. They're not trespassing. It's very specific. State has failed to show that I trespass at all, knowingly and intelligently remaining unlawfully after a reasonable request to leave. That I haven't gotten any reasonable request to leave, and they haven't provided any evidence to show my state of mind to knowingly entering or remaining after I've been asked to leave. No evidence for that whatsoever. And then the disorderly conduct is a laughing matter. I really hope that, you guys take your oaths to uphold the Constitution seriously. I didn't threaten anybody. This case law that I did cite is old and very well established Supreme Court case law. Not Arizona case law, it's Supreme Court case law, which is beholden and overrules anything that he's bringing into Arizona. This stuff is the First Amendment. I can follow him around and cuss at him all day as long as I don't threaten him. There is no laws that prevent that. Harassment, the ARS for harassment specifically excludes a police officer from being a victim of harassment.
Mr. Ruff, I understand that's your personal opinion.
It's not. I got the law in front of me. I've been studying this stuff for years, dude. You guys barely understand the First Amendment as it is. This is crazy that we're even arguing this right now. I've never threatened this man. The Supreme Court has already ruled I'm allowed to tell him to go fuck himself in the ass with a dildo if I want to.
Mr. Ruff.
I'm allowed to say that. It's mind-boggling that we're even arguing this right now. You are supposed to be a professional. He's supposed to be a professional. And we're arguing my speech. This is absolutely insane. I'm done talking.
I'm going to take just a couple-minute recess.
Judge, do I get it to respond?
You do, but I wanted to ask you for the exhibits.
Oh, sure.
Because I wanted to look at, it was 3. I want to look at just a snippet of that. I don't know if there's a demarcation on there. It's probably different on your computer than it was on the DVD. But
what's a demarcation? Do we not have Maricopa County Assessor's website where we can print stuff out to show the legalities as opposed to the white and the black?
Mr. Ruff, it's important, having heard the testimony, viewing the exhibits in this case, I did go back and look at that, at least that one part, and I know there were some other different areas where we could hear Mr. Ruff better than others, and I think you were skipping between different videos to do that. I just looked at the part of Exhibit 3. I wanted to look at the proximity. The court finds that the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt the charge of trespass. It's clear you can hear not just one officer, but several officers tell everybody to get back and need to get off the property. And when Sergeant Deuce exited the office area, I presume is what that was. You can clearly hear him. I think that was that Sergeant Deuce, or was it a different officer? It was Sergeant Deuce. You can clearly hear them telling people to get off the property, so that's not an issue. Everybody was clearly warned, clearly told. The statute says at the reasonable request of a police officer. It doesn't say that it has to even be from the owner of the property. If you read the statute, the court finds that there was more than a reasonable request made by the police officers. Not only was there a reasonable request made by the police officers, but the owner of the property, who had received a call from the manager, wanted these group of individuals off the property. So I think that's clear. I think the evidence establishes that clearly. So the court does find Mr. Ruff guilty of that. It's clear that he stepped back onto the property. It's clear that the testimony of the owner of the property said that it is the demarcation for him was the sidewalk. And clearly Mr. Ruff was standing within just feet of a room, of a hotel door. I don't think you were probably 10 feet away from the door. You can clearly see both you and Sergeant Deuce there. As to the charge of disorderly conduct, Mr. Ruff, I read the cases that you provided. In one case, can't remember which now, there were, I don't know if they were jackets or t-shirts that simply said, F the draft. That was the extent of it. They didn't approach anybody, they didn't yell at anybody, they didn't do any of those things. And I understand why the court ruled the way they did in that case. In the other case, it was where a person had made two comments, I believe, to the officer. It wasn't this prolonged, it was, hey, pick on somebody your own size. I can't remember what else they said, but in any event, it was not nearly the length or the display. And again, I'm only reading the cases from what the court's putting in the facts. I'm not hearing the testimony in those cases. But that's a far cry from what happened here. So, Mr. Ruff, I know that it is your position that you can do what you want and say what you want in terms of your words. I don't believe the statute protects you that way. In fact, I can tell you, Mr. Ruff, that, well, first of all, the court does find, because of the context of what you were saying and the proximity that you kept putting yourself in with the officer, that a reasonable officer would feel threatened based upon how you were doing this, in terms of you got so close to him that you kept doing that, Mr. Ruff. It's not like you said, this constant barrage of yelling at the officers continues. And if it were just you standing behind the tape or behind the line, Mr. Ruff, I wouldn't have found you guilty. But when you started to approach personally and to get into his personal space and use the names that you were saying and things that you were saying in the context of which you were saying them, and in the elevated tone and of your voice, the sergeant is doing absolutely nothing to you, and you are continuing on with a group of people. And the officer obviously had concerns and fear, because when those issues arise, it can be a tense situation. And I believe, based upon watching the video, that was a tense situation for the officers. And so the court is finding that you are guilty of disturbing this officer's peace. And so I don't know how the parties want to proceed. I know we had a matter set for trial this afternoon. That has been dismissed. That case was dismissed. So I don't know if you all want to. Well, we have the attorneys on the other matters as well. And so I don't know if Mr. Ruff wants to make. I suppose I should probably have them back here for sentencing. So we need to set 4 of your cases for sentencing, Mr. Ruff. But that is the conclusion of the court. The court does find you guilty.
Excellent. Disappointed in you, Schumacher. Very disappointed. You did not uphold your oath today. One of the other trials.
Yeah, Mr. Ruff. That's why you have the right to file.